Okay, so where have we been so far? So remember, the Ron started with the first two psukim of Breishis. He makes them, he understands them as referring to creation, yesh me'ayin, ex nihilo, something from nothing, whatever your favorite phrase is, um, of matter. And then from the matter, Hashem made elements, and from the elements, Hashem combined them to make different things, which the Ron starts out by saying are all superior to the elements themselves. Like, for example, dirt is superior to the element of earth, actual dirt, with the little touch of water and the little touch of this, and right, and air is mixed in, and it's therefore better than the actual element of earth. And of course, like squirrels and dogs are superior to any one element, and so on. So this is the model he builds up, and then he brings a pasuk from Koheles that talks about how humans are frail and the generations come and go, and all of this is because we're made out of these elements, and the elements are defective. So what could you expect from people? So the Ran takes on the duty of distinguishing between two kinds of mixtures. So the mixture that's diverse, um, then one element can, one piece can compensate for what lacks in the other. And the combination altogether is superior to the units. And when the mixture is not diverse and all of the elements are lacking something or have some failing, and when you add them up, you just have more and more of that failing. And and then he takes this. I mean, he's not just working with the elements; he also takes this when it comes to human communities. So that if you have a bunch of stingy people and they all get together, you'll just get people who are stingier and stingier. But if you have a normal mix of people, when some people are stingy, some people are sane with their money, some people throw their money around, then you get a healthier community because each one is influencing the other in the right direction. Right? You can pull towards sanity. So one thing I noticed about his approach is that it's kind of based on the same kind of ethics as the Rambam, because he's assuming that the mixture and the portfolio effect, as I put it last time, which gets you closer to the average, is a better place to be morally, right? Like the golden mean, which is not, by the way, the Rambam's expression. The Rambam's expression is Hamida Beinonis, the middle measure. There's also reason to believe the Rambam actually meant a dialectic middle. In other words, a middle that is good because you have both, not because it's halfway between them. We discussed this more, by the way, last series. We were talking about the extremes in the middle. Um, but the middle that's an average and the middle that's a tense dialectic, and it's a place where free will happens and so on because there's activity there, because it's where the poles meet. But in any case, in terms of this shear, what we're talking about now is that the Ran seems to be in the Rambam's camp, in that he thinks that his example is the stingy people and the people who throw their money around, which is almost literally the words he uses. And so and he talks about how by combining you get people closer to the middle. Kind of sounds kind of Rambamish in terms of what good midos are. And to me, this whole discussion seemed to speak to something very contemporary: the difference between the tzibur, which, as he quotes, Chazal says, you should always have yira, mora for the tzibur. Like there's something precious about a tzibur. There's a difference between a tzibur and an echo chamber. Because when you have a bunch of like that comes together, that tzibur effect doesn't happen. You have what Koheles talks about, where a bunch of things with a shared deficiency just build a deficiency on each other. Whereas in a real tzibur, you have a full mix of people, and the total effect on each person is therefore positive. So that's where we've seen so far. He's going to discuss more about the effects of a true mixture, diverse mixture of people, when we pick up. So, share screen one. So there we are. We left off just around here. We're still discussing the difference between Kohelis's case and the Ron's opening case. V'zos ha'isa hatana asher emas bo Kohelis hapsak din shenasan. And this is the taina, the claim. Rabbi Simmons has rationale. The taina is usually more of a claim that Kohelis, by which Kohelis reaches his psak din, his ruling that he gave. Lias mukavim kulam hevel ubilti ba'alekiyum. When you make a mixture of that are all from hevel, that are all vanity, and have no longevity, they're not balikiyum, they don't have permanence. Lias mikubatzim umurkavim mipratim. They are gathered and mixed. They're mixed and they're compounded. If you want to talk about chemistry, they're mixtures and compounds. Mipratim maskimim al zeh chisaron atzmo, that are in agreement on this one flaw. In Shlomo Mel's case, the flaw being impermanence. But don't extend this law to say that everything that is combined from flawed items, the flaw will exist in the mixture. Aval yischayev she'achisronos hamisnagdos mipshutim yimzagu v'yichol the shechronos hamisnagdos, the opposing flaws, mipshutim, in the elements, in the simple parts, yimzagu will mix v'yicholulu v'yuchlelu, and will be completed l'shleimus malas hamurkav v'mekubas behem. They'll reach completion, and they will raise the quality of the mixture that's gathered from them. And this is why the compound is better than the parts. Any form of shleimus that's in a part will be found in the whole. But flaws will not be found in the whole. It'll turn out that some piece that's missing from one of the parts will come out from the shleimus, from the whole, to bring perfection in others from potential to actual. So what you get with a combination is three things. First of all, whatever is good in a part is still present in the whole. Whatever is missing from the part might be compensated for by being present somewhere else. And then the third thing is, there are times where something's a defect, but by being in the presence of something else, the two work together for the benefit of the whole. So that what's a defect when standing alone can be combined with something else to be less defective. Not in the sense of an average, in the sense of, something has a pole sticking out that does nothing. Somebody else has a wheel. Now you have an axle and a wheel. So the whole has value in things that are pointless in the part.
They're complementary.
Right. Well, the complementary could also mean the averaging effect. I think he's spelling out three possibilities.
Okay.
There are times where they combine to make a nice average. There's times where they combine to make something new. And then there are times where just, you need a certain amount of X. It's like, it made me think of when I was learning this, it made me think of dominant genes. If one piece has the dominant gene, the eyes will be brown. The fact that the other parent is defective, I don't know if you can see my eye color through the glasses, but you could guess it at this point. If one of the parents is defective, it doesn't have any brown gene, right? It doesn't make a difference because the other parent will take care of the whole. Actually, brown and blue eyes are not Mendelian, but you got the gist. I just said it to make fun of blue-eyed people anyway. But in any case, there is this idea that sometimes, just the fact that one piece has it is enough for the whole to have it, and therefore the whole could have benefits that no one piece has.
The phrasing in the first few lines there, if you don't mind. Okay, so you mentioned that ta'ana is usually a claim rather than a proof.
A claim as in a legal claim, and
Right.
psak din is a ruling. He's
Right.
using a court metaphor for a line of reasoning.
Right. And when you said later Yid Hayeb, that
It's
that
also
sounded
court.
interesting.
It's also court language, yeah.
Yeah.
In Gezerah, he calls it a Gezerah.
Yeah.
Right?
I just wonder when
Lo
he
tam
says
shechsas Gezerah, yeah.
in the beginning, "V'zot hayta ta'ana asher," is that emate? Like
Make true. I
make
thought
true or
I
prove
thought it's a
true?
verb form of emes that's not very widely used. That was the way I read
That's
it.
what I thought also. I
Okay.
also
Uh,
thought that.
yeah, Rabbi Simmons thinks it substantiates.
Substantiates is yeah, which
Right. I mean, I
I
think
guess
an
is
epistemologist would say
interesting.
justifies. Right. It's
Proves
not. No, a proof is
that. Yeah.
is much more solid and often doesn't even exist. Right. Like you can't. You can prove things in math. You usually can't prove things in like philosophy, and that's the Kuzari whole problem with philosophy. You can't prove it. You
Fair
can
enough.
only argue it. So, but in any way, so justifications was whatever it is. Okay. וזהו עניין הנרמז בחלבונה. And this idea is alluded to in the inclusion of chalvona, which is generally translated frankincense. But I'm going to leave it for chalvona because I have no idea what frankincense is either.
I feel like I've usually seen halbana
As
translated
galbona,
as galbanum, which I looked
which
up
is
once,
transliterated, not translated.
but I looked it up once based on something that a friend of mine mentioned, and there's there's like a few species of plants that are called galbanum, and that list overlaps with the list of species that are considered asafoetida. So
I
halbana
don't,
overlaps with hiltit.
I
What
don't.
was the
You
second
lost
one you
me.
said?
Asafoetida,
Can you spell that?
ASAF, and then either OE or just ETIDA. It's like a Latin name that means something like fetid resin, like gross
Spell.
smelling stuff. And that seems to be close to Hiltit in the Gemara, that it defines as like one of the prototypes of a food object that's harif, but it's
So
known
we know that
specifically.
chalvona tastes good because it's often put on a mincha. It's put on the cover of mincha, but it's often put on flour offerings, on bread offerings.
Is that Levona as opposed to Halbana?
It could be. You're right. It could very well be. Yeah. Either way, it sounded less exciting than putting maple syrup on my pancakes. But what can you do? And my kids know from an early age that when I bring them to shul, I ask them, do they want to go to pancake offering services? Because as a dad, I have to use the same pun for their entire childhood, or else they'll get worried it's
Over
somebody
and
else.
over and over and over and over and over again.
Yes.
I'm
Right.
with you. I'm totally with you.
Okay. וזהו עניין הנרמז בחלבונה, הנכנסת בסימני הקטורס. And this is the issue with chalvona, which is included in the list of the samane, of the spices in the Ketores. Diem heyos chalvona meitzaratzma biltinu nusa. The odor of frankincense on its own, the odor of chalvona on its own, is not particularly pleasant. Efsher sheyiya la koach orer. It's possible that it has the power to awaken lahotzi ichius hasamim hacherim, to really bring out the quality, the attributes of the other spices. Laorer bisam bisamysum there, and to awaken their spiciness. V'chein al tzad hamashal. Therefore, by example or by comparison, im yimtzu bichlal echad. Now, by example is more correct. If you find pratim balei chisaron, if you find in a group bichlal echad pratim, one of the parts balei chisaron is lacking something. Ma'asher yachbid aleihem hakoach ma'orer linikama. No, it's not revenge. Bilti mishu eres. Actually, no, it is revenge. So you have one person in the group who's like, he's quick to take revenge. Bimatam betoch haklal, when you put them in the group, yauru kochosehem, will wake up their potentials. Lamasha roi bepolazeh, to an appropriate amount of this action. Umasha tzivsa bo Torah, that which the Torah has commanded. Tihemish aru ha'olam lechi mechuvan ha'torahi. They will channel them along the paths of the Torah. I thought Torah Yi was another one of the Ran's more interesting grammatical constructions. The im hayu hamaorim mitzad hatchuna bilti tova, and even if those who do the awakening have a less than great version of this quality, and what applies with this tchuna, with this ability, would apply to all the abilities. So if there's a positive part to the inclusion of you have somebody who is very quick to take revenge. So somebody who's more committed from the Torah will learn to be more quick to enforce rules, or more quick to something else, some other kind of righteous indignation that has a positive spin. And therefore their presence in the group is a net plus for the group, even though the midah as they express it is not as constructive. And similarly, if you have somebody who is a spendthrift in a group of people who don't really have money issues, spendthrift is not necessarily the one I wanted to use. If somebody's overly generous, and you have a group of people who are basically committed to good causes, that person being in the mix could increase the amount of tzedakah given by everyone else, because his loose purse strings will rub off on everybody else. Okay? Miza inyan. And along these lines, Ukasher.
It's like a baker sometimes puts a salt in. Like sometimes they put like a salt wash on a pastry because it enhances the taste.
Right, even though you don't want a salty pastry.
Exactly.
You're not
Right.
going for a savory pastry, but you still put a little salt on because, well, salted caramel is a big thing now.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Good mushel. Umiza inyan who shekasher is chayiv me so does a chasarim. Um, that when you need to put together from elements which are flawed. That's the three words in the second pasuk of Breishis, where we said choshech is a reference to light, or at least defective light. Utahom is water, the deep water in the earth, and ruach being the fourth element. So Tom serves double duty in his medrash. But there you have the four elements, or kavim shleimim. Um, Everything that's whole has to be combined from these four defective elements that are introduced in the second pasuk. Ken yischayev yimtze klal ve'eda chashuva. Similarly, it's necessary to be found in a community and a worthy congregation, an important congregation, that it has people who aren't so honorable. Therefore, you should always be careful with the kavod of the tzibur. The imkain efo ma lazos yakar gdula klal murkav mipratim chashuvim kazeh. All the more so if you have a congregation that is, you're looking at the positive pieces. The people who would be chashuv on their own right. Torah. You shouldn't speak in front of the Torah. V'kol shkein binyan yakar ha'erech hagadol hamala k'mas Breishis. All the more so something precious and valuable like Ma'aser Breishis. Shemadaber bo lo yimaleit me'echad mishnayim. This is the Mishnah Chagiga, which I have over on the side. Ein darshan barayis b'shlosha, below b'ma'aser Breishis b'shnayim, below b'markava b'yachid. He's talking now about the middle part where it says you shouldn't be teaching Ma'aser Breishis in more than two, in front of more than two. Shamadaber b'lo yimaleit echad mishnayim. Oh, sorry. He shouldn't talk from one of two reasons. I'm jumping ahead. He doesn't quote the Mishnah yet. So, im sheyadabo, if he knows what he's talking about, im shalom yadabo, or if he doesn't know what he's talking about, im yadabo, if he does know what he's talking about, reyu over al mashi's hero in darshim b'masberich. If he knows what he's talking about, then he's violating the rule in the Mishnah about teaching Ma'aser in front of a group of two people, two students. Right? Ma'aser is esoteric, and it needs to be taught one-on-one so that you give the student undivided attention. And if he doesn't know it, who ose benafsho sheker, he's making himself a liar. Who make bekavod tzibor, and he is making light of the honor of the tzibor. Umora benasho rumbavavo, and he's gonna make his soul like he's some lofty egotistical heart. She'ain safek shazem misovev memidas hagaiva, because there's no doubt that teaching something you don't understand is caused by gaiva. So Moshe Amar David, like David says, and this is Sher Malos David. We have it on the side here with the Tilim Kuf Lamed Aleph. Hashem lo gava libi velo ramu einai. Hashem, do not raise my heart, do not lift my eyes. Velo halachti bigdolo bigdolos neflaos bimeni. And I did not I hilachti and did not walk me in things that are great and wondrous for me. So I included that last part. It wasn't in the original in brackets here because to me it seems the proof is well gava libi velo ramu I didn't make me loft a balgaiva in my heart or lift up my eyes. Velo halachti b'gdolos v'los mimeni is referring to teaching things like Ma'aser Breishis they don't actually understand. So I think the proof from the pasuk rested a lot in the Vagomer. Horek he Roma Lev. This teaches that the having a high heart, thinking overly much of yourself, Yavi Adam Ledaber Mima Shu Niska Vanella Mimenu will cause a person to talk about things that are hidden from him. Basher Yeshlo Hatchuna Hara'a, and when he has this evil propensity, Ushafal Me'erko, he is lowered in value. And any Yochel Lamod the Makom Gedolim, he can't stand among the great. Kamo Shamar, the Higi Staito, if he makes himself presumptuous, Hakadosh Baruch Hu mashpilo, Hakadosh Baruch Hu knocks him down. The Arakosov and the pasuk says, Lifnei Shefer Gaon. Before destruction comes gaiva, comes pretensions of greatness. I wondered if this is the origin of the English expression "pride cometh before the fall." I don't know if there's a different verse they're translating, or they're mistranslating shever as fall. I don't know. I don't know all the verses they would translate either. You know what I mean? It could be from the Sunday supplement and not from Tanakh, too. I wouldn't know. Anyway, is chayva kniya sibas hagaiva lishnei sibos. Being knocked down, being humbled, has to come from gaiva for two reasons. Everybody with me so far? Before we get into the two reasons. Hachas, the first reason, mida connected mida. Because that's the way Hashem works in general. Mida connected mida, the punishment always fits the crime. It's always measure for measure. So somebody who wants to be, lifted up higher than is appropriate. Madrigaso, it makes sense that he will be lowered from his position. Vashenis, what's the second reason? This is the way of creation. Chayav Leo's Koldover Miskayim Vinishmar B'Makom Hinachto a TV. Each person, each thing naturally goes to its normal resting place. We're about to learn about medieval gravity. V'sheyiv sad, when it's lost, k'sheyiv bezulas mekomo, when it's not in its place. Kasher yikra la'avir, what happens to air? Im yunach lamata me'amayim. If you rest it underwater, what happens to the air? It bubbles out of the water and comes up to where air belongs. Olaretz, or earth. Im tuchrach liyos lamala me'avir. If you take a clump of dirt and you put it higher than the air, it falls because that's where earth belongs. Va'od ki teva yitzira chayiv liyos elyonim mutadim. Okay, so that's part two. So part two is things naturally return to their correct positions. And therefore, if somebody goes too far up, they're naturally going to be brought back to where they belong. Ba'od, more, kiteva yitzira, a second natural principle, chayiv liyos ha'elyonim mutadim lekabel shvelos. Those who are up will be forced to go down, to accept lowliness. Liyos hatachtonim mutadim leisromim. It's a wheel, right? The wheel of fortune, without Bob Barker. So, right, anybody who's up at some point, their prosperity will be brought down. Anybody who's lower, their fortunes will be brought up. Amru, Nagad Shemei Avad Shemei. Somebody who fights for his name, who magnifies his name, will lose his reputation. So the more this is from Hillel. The Mishnah starts to Yomer, but I inserted in the translation its Hillel statement. Nagad Shemei Avad Shemei. Somebody is busy fighting to make their name great, so they lose their reputation. Kiteva Metzius Kain Chayev, because nature requires this. In my industry, we call it reverting to the mean. Right? Something has an average value. If you pull it away from the average, you'd expect it to revert to the mean. To return there. Just on average, things end up at average. So if it's above average, it's more likely to go down than up. Because it doesn't quite work because the mean is a trend line. So the things tend to go up in value overall. The stock market's not where it was 20 years ago. Right? So when it goes down, you expect it to go up to the trend line. But either way, you get the idea that it's just natural for that which is up to be brought down and that which is down to be brought up. So that is why Hillel said that the person who works big on his reputation is going to end up losing it. And we're going to explain this in Perek Beis when we talk about the mist rising from the ground. Ki Hashemesh Poel, the sun works, which is nice. Vover b'yisodos kulam, it works into all of the elements down on earth. Ad merkaz haaretz, until the center of the planet. Oh, man, I can't see the letters here. Ubesibas tenuos mala adim mishnei yisodos haftachtonim. And by means of its action, of its motion, of its tenua, right? It brings up from the
usually movement.
Yeah. But it's more like a directed. It's like it's doing it out of its.
Mm-hmm.
It's a movement, but movement of a given, like the direction of the movement's important. I don't know. Movement's a good translation, but it has connotations that movement lacks. Mala adim mishnei. It brings up a mist from the two lower elements, which is earth and water. Until they turn into the loftier elements of fire and air. So his explanation of mist, the Ve'ed Yalim and Haaretz, the mist coming up from the ground, is that the sun turns the earth and the water into things that are more like fire and air. Now, I said in the first year that the four elements are kind of like the three phases of matter and energy. And it's kind of true here, too, that's what they were seeing. That, you put heat into water and the water starts acting more like air. Right? It goes up because the steam is the heat. It's whatever. Kiavir hine zeh mavur shekibel tziras hamayim v'yashuv matar nasa arza. And air, when it assumes the form of water, what happens when water condenses out of the air? It falls down as rain. This can also happen with fire. This could have also happened with fire. In divine mercy, so really, fire would also go in a cycle, like the water cycle, where water turns into air in the form of mist, and then come back down in the form of rain. So there could have been a fire cycle, but God decided to have Rahmanis on us. Kamo asher gazar sheikavu amayim al makom echad, like the way he was gozer that all the water should be gathered to one place, the tiraya yabasha, and let the land be seen. Afal pisha mina gativi yischayv lehefach, even though by nature water should be scattered and cover the earth. So this idea that earth, being the heaviest of the elements, is exposed is a bending of the laws of nature, or a rewriting of what you'd have expected law of nature to be, because Hashem in his Rachman wanted us to have dry land to stand on. So similarly, he didn't have fire fall out of the heavens, except in this week's parsha, right? Because humanity couldn't survive. But in truth, the mechanics of the world should have been that just as earth and water could take the form of air and go up, also, and air could take the form of water and fall, meaning evaporate and condense, the same should have been true for fire. See, this is what I was trying to explain to John. He uses these things as a mushal, but you can't just say it's only a mushal, because he's really concerned about the fact that the physical world works this way too.
But what about like the hail barad falling with fire in it, or Eliyahu calling down fire on Ahav's soldiers?
Right. So that you're right. I didn't think of the second example, but I just did say except in this week's parsha. Yeah, no. So he would say that this is this should have been the natural order, and instead it only happens in miraculous cases. But his point is that the natural order
he's really
yeah. I lost you,
What was his point? I lost you there, Micha.
His point is
what did you say? His point. Yeah.
I believe his point is that anything that things are supposed to cycle. And anything that's down should be coming up, and anything that's up should be coming down.
Right. Okay, that's what I thought his point was.
He then uses the elements as an example, and then he makes well, not an excuse, but he explains that fire is an exception, that it goes up and doesn't come down, but only because Hashem wants us to exist. And that couldn't happen if fire was falling out of the sky on a daily basis. Right? You need a miracle like Barad and people, or plants not, Hashem wanting to destroy plants for fire to fall out of the sky. It's not, the way the world, but the way the world should have been, because everything else in the world, what's up comes down and what's down comes up. And remember that we're kind of more focusing on his human level, because it's easier than trying to relate to elements and relate equally to his physical level. But he's talking on both levels, right? But we relate more to the human side of the equation. And he's saying that this natural, just like there's a water cycle, there's a human ego cycle. And somebody who's doing well will come down, and somebody who's doing poorly will have his day in general. That's the natural order. It's the person who never has his day and the person who always stays on top that need explaining. And then he said the other reason for the Baal Gaiva is Mida Keneged Mida punishment, which would mean the reward for the Anav is also Mida Keneged Mida reward. Speaking of the Anav, that reminds me of one of Rabbi Dr. Abraham Twersky's central teachings. That Gaiva comes from insecurity. The person who has a healthy self-respect doesn't need to show off and get his validation from others. It's the person who, right? So the Baal Gaiva, the person who acts egotistical, is the person who actually can't get it without being validated by others, and that's why they brag. So there is kind of there's something about the Anav, right? The Anav has that personal in self respect, and if others recognize it, then the lofty, the not gaiva, but the being the being having a positive reputation is built on the same seeds as another. So this is a Haggah, which is why it's in parentheses. This is an excursion that he takes, and the translator, Rabbi Simmons, decided not to translate it, so it's just one column across. Amar Gaon Rav Sadia. So Rav Sadia Gaon writes, Tikodem Noah Chaya Keshes, that rainbows did predate no, I skipped ahead. Sorry. We didn't get to the rainbow. I'm thinking, like, why am I going on the excursion on rainbows? We didn't do rainbows yet. It's because I jumped ahead a paragraph. This is the matter of rainbows. The ain't suffix shazah mare who poel TV me'achas nitzot hashemesh ba'avir halach. There's no doubt that it's a natural consequence of the sun's rays in wet air. So he understood that the wet air is breaking up the sun. By the way, the word nitzot is yeah.
This is Sadia Gon or because I've heard this from Ramban.
No,
Is Ramban getting it from Sadia Gon?
No, this is not so far Sadia Gon or Ramban. Okay, so far I jumped back. I jumped too far ahead to the Sadia Gon. He's about to quote the Ramban in the next line. Yeah. Okay. Remember that he is living in Girona, so he's not far the Ramban's grand students or great grand students. So it's not surprising that he quotes the Ramban. Anyway, Upal TV, Kas Nitzos Hashemesh Avir Lach, when the sun's rays strike the wet air. Kamo Shama Haramban, like the Ramban says. Okay? Shal Karchenu, Yesh Lanu Lahodos Pazeh, Ledivrei Philosophia. Whether we like it or not, we have to agree to the words of the philosophers. Hayavanis, Greek philosophy. Tihu inyan muchash lo nicho nucha lahachish hachush. Because this is an observable, and we can't possibly argue with something that you can see for yourself. You could sense it to yourself. How could you deny it? Vim Kane, yesh lishol. So therefore, you have to ask, how did this become a sign for Noah? Right? What kind of sign is this? That Hashem will not flood the world again. It's natural. Al Karchenu, what are we forced to say? Yikra Cain Kodem Amabul. It has to be that this happened before the Mabul too. Kasher Kara Achrav, just as it happens after the Mabul. Im Cain Ein Zeos, how's this? It's the sign. Just like there's no sign of the fate of the day because the sun came up that morning. That's obligatory in the workings of the world. Okay, so we're gonna go on an excursion. So I'm gonna give you a little bit of a spoiler, so you see where this paragraph went. He just told you that the reward and punishment of gaiva, or any mida, but gaiva is the example he focused on, is to be lowered. He also said that it's natural. So he's talking right now about things where hashgacha and nature coincide, work together. So now you understand how he's bringing up the rainbow, because so far all he's argued is that if the rainbow's natural, how could it be a sign? But he's also but he's doing this in the middle of a discussion about how things are natural can also be reward and punishment mida connected mida. Like the system's set up so that the natural world can take care of some of the hashgacha stuff. And that's where he's going to go with it. But let's take the detour because we're learning the book and not the idea. Amar Hagon Rav Sadia. So now this is the part that I went to, the excursion, the Hagah about Rav Sadia Gaon. Tikodim Noah Chaya Keshes. Rav Sadia Gaon agrees, writes with what the Ramban later agrees, that there had to be rainbows before there was the Noach. Veinenu lo os v'lo mo face. It's not a sign and it's not a miracle. It's not a wonder. Avalhu kamo aid agal ve'ed the Ada Hamatseva. It's a symbol, like if you make a pile of stones or a big stone, like we had Galed in Breishis. L'chein Amar es kashti nasati ba'onan. That's why it says, I put my rainbow in the cloud. Lo Amar asher ani nosein. The rainbow that I am putting in the cloud. But B'lashon Avar, he says, asher nasati ba'onan. That rainbow which I put in the cloud before this breath. V'zeh kasvo Rambam ferish b'Torah. And this is what the Rambam says explicitly in his commentary on the Torah. V'rabim amru ki hashemesh haya yoser. There are many others who say that the sun was more strong. Achar mabel, after the mabel yorsami masha yakodem. It was stronger than it was before. And therefore, there are rainbows in the clouds that they didn't have beforehand. Very shono ikar, but the first idea is the main one. I mean, it is possible that if before the Mabul there was more water in the air, right, then refraction wouldn't have reached the Earth the same. The sun would have seemed weaker, and you wouldn't have had rainbows because the air didn't refract the same if there was just always humid. You didn't have going from water drop. You didn't have going from humidity to dry. So I don't know. Maybe the physics works. Perish acher. What's another perish of the pasuk? Eskashti nasati be'anan. I put my rainbow in the cloud. Nevucho bo harishonim. The Rishonim were perplexed by this. Shekvar amru achukim sharkeshes inyan tivi shemalahid hashemesh ba'avir alach yithava, because they already knew in the days of the Rishonim that natural law says that the wet air breaks up the sun into colors. Kikain year b'klimayim, you see it when water goes into a jar of water. You also see a spectrum. And if so, how could this be a sign of the promise that there won't be another Mabul? Therefore, how do they teach it? That the rainbow, which I put in the cloud in the day of creation, should from now on be a sign of the covenant. When you see it, When you see it, it'll be a sign between you and me. But it's a fetch.
Isn't this the same what he said on the previous page with Khalid?
Yeah, I thought so too. But now he's saying it's a fetch. So let's see where he ends up. Yes, rainbows did exist. Halach lo ba'anan, in moist air, not in the cloud. Mishanasno laos haya ba'anan. Now he's saying that it happens in clouds instead of happening in wet air. Vatam lafisha ananim hayu chizke ha'arpulayos. So he's making the opposite argument of the people in the last paragraph. So the people in the last paragraph said that the sun was stronger after the Mabul. Now he's arguing something more like what I said when I was trying to explain them, that the clouds were thicker before the Mabul. And therefore you wouldn't see the rainbow in the cloud. It would be bent toward the nature of dust. Which is attached to the mist that's rising up. Anybody want to guess on how to translate that? Because I do not recall. So either way, it messes up the refraction, but I don't remember how the word said that. I just remember the idea of the sentence as a whole. Anybody want to pull out Google Translate so that we don't have to close with a sentence we didn't know?
Is mutarot like atar? Like located?
Could be if he's borrowing from Aramaic Shorashim.
But that wouldn't match hahatacha, which is singular.
No. No. It's definitely somehow it ruins the refraction. And atar is Aramaic. That's why I said he could be using an Aramaic borrow. But...
Well, I'm stumped.
I mean, hatacha, isn't that like to pour out or something? With like molten metal?
Yeah. Maybe like the clouds became more.
Jasper has his hatach referring
from
to
the melting point.
Melted tallow.
Yeah, that's it. Was that how you moved? It would reach the melting point. I mean, that is why you're thinking of melting metal. And point is the atar. It is atar as location, but here means point. Or maybe that's a Hebrew Aramaic definition. He changed their nature. So it used to be that when mist came up, it came up in bigger grains, with bigger grains of dirt, and not just, dirty water. And therefore, it couldn't make rainbows in the clouds. He's actually saying that the afarios, the dust, so the dirt that's on the water would melt and then Hashem, what's it called, had rachmim on the earth, and it thinned out until there could be a rainbow. But this is a physics discussion. What I found interesting is that he ends up saying there wasn't a rainbow before this point, or if there was, or more accurately, if there was a rainbow before this point, it was not seen in clouds. And nature actually did change, because he says, Shana Tivam. So he changed the nature of Earth. So he does not end up exactly where the scientists ended up. And he won't deny the evidence that water that goes through a crystal or through water makes a spectrum. Right? He just says that the conditions before nature were such that clouds were dirtier and they didn't make these spectra. And now the spectra are in the clouds and not just in misty water. So it used to be that the only time you saw a rainbow was when you put your finger in front of the hose. And now even a cloud could make a rainbow. And that's okay. So to recap, what did we really see today? We saw, first of all, exactly 3 ways in which the whole can benefit from the negatives of either compensate for or benefit from the negatives of the parts. Either they compensate because those that have are enough, even if not everybody has. The second one was those that have too much can be averaged out by those who have too little. And the third one was that what doesn't work for one will work in another setting, and they bring that to the table, right? Whether we talk about the missing piece that the other one has is filled by the flaw, or we use the salt, or we use Moshe who does salting the pastry metaphor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Either way, so that's the first piece we saw. The second piece we saw was that the Ran is building a case from rainbows that it's normal for nature and Schar Va'onesh to end up in the same place. That which is done by Hashgacha and that which is done by nature will coincide. And he started with the example of the Baal Gaiva, right? And he brings arguments from how they understood the elements work, and he brings from the fact that everything else goes in cycles. But he's making this case that Mida Keneged Mida can be a natural phenomenon. And so rainbows are also a case where the symbol is a natural phenomenon that now has meaning in the context of the covenant. Anybody thoughts, feelings, emotions, something I glossed over that I considered a tough L, you consider an ick, or anything like that?
He's really, really hard to understand.
Yeah, there's a reason why we're only covering like 3 pages a week.
So I saw that the art scroll one, they have an art scroll one, but I didn't get around to probably thinking of getting it.
Right, it has more footnotes and content than.
Oh, see why?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not so user friendly.
No, but what I liked about it was that it's his points are extracting the points is difficult. His points really are. I mean, like here he's talking about 4 elements, but he ends up in a place where when you're dealing with a world that is going from we sit in countries that are currently making transition from communities to echo chambers. And to me, that's like the Iker message of what we've seen so far, is that combinations only work when you have that diversity. And if you don't have the diversity, you're just adding up the same minus over and over and over again. And the pluses never compensate because you don't have this one's peg doesn't fit that one's hole. It's just more, the excess is more excess and the deficiency is just more deficiency. So I kind of like the way I like the fact that he humanizes what could be a basically, metaphysical argument about mixtures and parts and